So after hitchhiking across America and stowing away on a plane and then bumming around Europe as a youth, this legend toiled in band after band, trying to make it in music for about a decade. He actually dropped out of Cornell University to chase his rock and roll dreams, and he formed a bar band that broke into the Billboard Top 10 with a brilliant hit written by Mutt Lange, which is what he's going to tell us about next in an exclusive interview where he admits that the music video for this first big hit single, it was excruciatingly awful. The pain of watching it for the first time with label executives, well, it's a cool story. It's pretty funny. Coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies. Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. If you love the history of music straight from the artist's mouth, you're going to want to be a full-time part of this channel by subscribing below. And when you do that, make sure to hit the bell so you always get our daily features, a story straight from the legends. Also, check out more content on our Patreon. You can become an insider. So it's time for another edition of our show Breakthrough. This is where we break down the singular song, album, or event that kicked open the door to an artist or band's career and, gave them that momentum to rocket to long-term success. Hugh Anthony Craig III. He was born the day after Independence Day in 1950. He later changed his name to Huey Lewis and become one of the premier acts of the 1980s, with multiple hits, including 3 #1 hits. In fact, from 1983 to about 1988, Huey Lewis and his band, The News, had 11 top 10 hits and 2 #1 albums, including the 7 times Platinum Sports. Huey Lewis had a 5-year run that you could really put up against anybody in the rock and roll era. I mean, you think about it. From his output from 83 album Sports to his 86 record 4, he seemed invincible. Huey Lewis is actually one of only 7 artists in the rock and roll era to have at least 2 albums that each had 4 top 10 hits. He had 4 on Sports with Heart and Soul, that went to number 8. Then there was I Want a New Drug, The Heart of Rock and Roll, and If This Is It, they all went to the number 6 spot. 'Cause she's heart and soul. He actually outdid that on his next album with 5 top 10 hits from his 1986 LP4. Jacob's Ladder and Stuck With You both went to number 1. Then Hip to Be Square hit number 3, while Doing It All for My Baby and I Know What I Like both hit number 6 and number 9 respectively. He also had a number 1 in the middle of that with The Power of Love from Back to the Future. That went to number 1 between the 2 powerhouse albums. That's the power of love. By the way, the other 6 artists to have 2 or more albums with at least 4 top 10 hits each are Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, Lionel Richie, Madonna, and Janet Jackson. Pretty amazing company to be in there. And Huey accomplished all of this without a shtick, without a sideshow or a gag. He and his band, The News, they just worked their butts off and created great hooks, great melodies that really still resonate today. What you saw was what you got. They were average-looking Joes with an energetic live show that made their audience lifelong fans. I've never met anyone who doesn't like Huey Lewis. It's true. His music is still being discovered by coming generations. Now, undoubtedly in the 80s, Huey was a household name and one of the good guys of rock and roll. Some assume that it was overnight success, but they'd be wrong. Huey broke his back in music for years leading up to his first major hit. He was born in New York City, but was raised in Marin County in California. He started playing in bands early on, and coming up, Huey tells the story of how he developed in music. He was a world traveler from a very young age, hitchhiking across the country from San Francisco to New York City. While he was waiting to hitch a ride, he'd actually play his harmonica. And before long, he had the chops to play just about anything. Now, when he got accepted into the prestigious Cornell University, His father, who was a doctor, actually told him that he should take a year off before going to college and just go bum around Europe. And not too much later, he hung around an airport for 3 days. Then he stowed away on a flight to Europe. He traveled around, had some really cool experiences, including busking in Madrid, Spain, playing his blues harp where he earned enough money to buy a ticket home to America. When he got back to the U.S., he went to Cornell. He was in the engineering program, I believe. Huey was wicked smart, still is. He actually scored a perfect score in the math section of his SATs. Now, as he went to school there, he made friends with Doc Robinson, who's the singer from the band King Harvest, who had that big hit in '72, Dancing in the Moonlight. He also befriended Lance and Larry Hoppin from the band Orleans, who had several hits in the '70s, Still the One and Dance With Me.
We're still having fun, and you're still the one. I want to be your partner, can't you see?
Huey started playing music with a band called Slippery Elm. At the end of 1969, he dropped out of college, and he moved back to San Francisco to go after music full-time. As he tried to break out, he supported himself any way he could, from working in carpentry and landscaping. He was also a delivery guy for a natural food company. He was even a wedding and events planner. In 1971, Huey joined famous San Francisco band Clover. In fact, their album was produced by another up-and-comer, his name Robert Mutt Lange. I'll let Huey tell you the highlights of that time. But Mutt Lange would prove to be very important to Huey's quest to be a professional musician. Huey toiled in music for almost a decade before he finally made it. He actually got some really good advice when he opened up for Thin Lizzy from Phil Lynott, and the two became friends. So up next, we get the story of Huey's climb to making it in music. It tells the story of his breakthrough hit, Do You Believe in Love? That hit number 7 in 1982, and it really set his career in motion. Now, as we get into this interview, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear, the glasses I rock on this show daily. Right now, if you go right up here and click on the info button, you're going to find all of Zenni's summer styles. You can design perfect frames, searching by color, shape, and style. You can try them on virtually to see how you look before you buy. You just put in your prescription, and they'll deliver them right to your door. And I might add, up to 80% off regular retail prices. You'll get the best deal here. Make sure to click there to get it. Here's Huey Lewis with the story of the 80s classic, Do You Believe in Love?
I was walking down a one-way street.
Well, let me go back. I want to go back to the very, very beginning and ask you, Huey, what was it for you, whether it was a song that you heard on the radio, something that you saw, or someone in your life that kicked open the door to your mind and made you want to pursue music? What was like the moment? Do you remember?
Yeah, my dad was a doctor by trade, but he was a drummer and a piano player.
Yeah.
Was his love, and he had a set of drums set up in the living room all the time. And he used to sit me on the drums and make me play time when I was a kid. So we had music around all the time, but it was always big band stuff and never many singers, because the old man he loved jazz and he liked the big bands. He just thought the singers were getting in the way. And so I gravitated towards the singing thing because it was something my old man didn't do,
Well, and then some of the records that you grew up with. Tell me about that inspiration.
Well, as a kid, we listened to Top 40 radio, the radio thing. And we had, were some Bobby Rydell.
In a world without love.
But the R&B thing was what got me, Now That I Can Dance and that. And immediately, as soon as I started playing harmonica, I was probably 12 or 13, I discovered Muddy Waters.
Got a boy child coming, gonna be a son of a gun.
Sonny Boy, through the harmonica, Little Walter, Sonny Boy Williamson, and I became a blues snob, an absolute blues snob. And I wouldn't listen to radio or any of that stuff, just so it was all blues for me for a while. And then when I got to college, I joined a band, and it was kind of not top 40, but we did cover tunes. We covered what was going on the FM radios at that point. And so I found that although certain kinds of music were more fun to listen to for me, all music was fun to play. And so it kind of broke I became much less of a snob and started to appreciate all kinds of music.
On Clover, they, of course, were the backing band for Elvis Costello. My Aim Is True, You Were with Clover.
Detectives, ooh, he's so cute.
And then, of course, Bob Brown, who from Pablo Cruz, found your demo tape, helped you land a record deal. The self-titled record that first came out was kind of largely ignored at first, but really picture this in '82.
Mm-hmm.
Some huge memories for me, because I remember my dad having the record, seeing that cover with you on the front, and the song, of course, Do You Believe in Love, which was written by Mutt Lange.
Right.
I wanna love you all over.
I always read that you guys didn't necessarily want to cut that at first because you wanted to do your own stuff, but you brought such an amazing vocal on that song. Tell me the story about when he brought it to you, because it was actually called something different when he first brought it.
Yeah, it was well, with Picture This, we decided we were going to produce ourselves, which was, you have to remember the climate. There was no internet, there was no jam band. It was, radio was king. And radio in those days, top 40 radio was invented with the advent of push button radio in Fresno.
Yep.
I think in the 50s when radios were, and this guy opined that as long as you didn't play something that people didn't like, they would stick with your station.
Yeah.
So the idea was to narrow your playlist, top 40, just play the 40 best songs over and over and over. Well, by 1980, it was called CHR, Contemporary Hit Radio. In the 60s, of course, FM radio came and played anything and everything, and they were hardly programmed. Disc jockeys would play their own music and all that stuff. But by 1980, everything was programmed. And the only format that mattered at all was called Contemporary Hit Radio, CHR. And that was probably 28 songs, not even 40. And by the way, if you were 28 or 27, you only got a play or two a day. If you were top 5, they played you 8 or 9 times a day. So that radio was king. MTV started in the early 80s, but their playlist exactly mirrored radio and records' playlist.
Yeah.
Exactly. So radio was king. And we knew there was only one avenue to success. There was no jam band stuff, any of that. So
Right.
you had to have a hit single. And that was the hardest thing for us because we were kind of a rootsy band and my voice wasn't classic top 40 stuff. And so and we decided if we wanted to do that, we ought to do that ourselves because, if the commerciality thing is a slippery slope and we wanted to maintain our integrity and all this stuff. So we convinced our manager, and then our manager convinced the record label that we should produce ourselves. And so with Picture This, we began to aim songs at radio and learn how to make records for radio. And you remember in those days, everything had to be truncated.
Yep.
The idea, if you didn't get to the hook in 30 seconds,
Oh,
you were
yeah.
out of there. So that's why intros are smart. It's interesting, come the complete opposite of the jam band thing where everything was. So that's what we did. We chiseled and abbreviated and truncated and distilled and tried to make this
Yeah.
thing. And so we wrote songs of ours, most of the stuff we wrote, but I called Mutt just to cover our bases. And Mutt's a good friend of mine and said, hey, you got any songs, we could do? And he sent, We Both Believe in Love.
Yeah.
And I rewrote the lyric a little bit and we cut it. And just as a kind of a, make sure we had our bases covered, and it was our first single.
Oh, you making me believe it too.
Like I said, to me, it sounded like new wave doo-wop. I mean, it had an essence of new wave in it.
Yeah, I guess.
That's what the news kind of had that.
I think that's more of an image thing. I mean, we looked like that kind of,
But the synthesizers,
You believe it too.
but also the vocal on that really introduced the world to what you were about.
Right. Well,
really-
we were a roots band. The idea was, how do we make this contemporary? Well, the stuff we love is soul music and R&B and early rock and roll and all that stuff. So how do we make this contemporary? So we used drum machines.
I was walking down a one-way street.
Which were brand new. In 1980, we heard that Roger Lynn had captured Jeff
The Lynn drum
Becerro's drums in a machine. What? Yeah, he's got Piccaro's drums in the. What do you mean? It's a chip. A chip? What's a chip? Oh, that's just a chip you put in. That's his. So you're kidding me. So we got to try that. So Bad is Bad for him was dish, dish.
Hey, wait for me.
Dish, dish, which is a machine-y, and then the doo-wop. So we were the idea was to put both of those things together, you know, the old and the new and all, and
the harmonies on that song.
and that would
so
be
great.
that would be our little niche. We figured. And with the sports album, we aimed at fully 6 songs because "Do You Believe in Love" was kind of a hit, but that record sold, I think, 250,000 copies.
Went to number 7
when it came out, which was like break even because it was expensive in studio. So with a sports album, we really had to have a hit, and we aimed 6 songs at radio because radio was king. We knew we needed a hit. We didn't know we were going to have 6 of them.
Now, one thing that isn't in this interview that Huey explained to me after the fact is a story about making the music video for Do You Believe in Love. He said that they had a surprisingly big budget for being an up-and-coming band, and that this director came in and had them wear these really bright colors with pastoral lighting and colors in the video. They had to wear makeup, like, you know, had rosy cheeks, and when they finished it, the record label had this big release party and invited everyone who worked on the video and everybody at the label and the band to watch, you know, the finished product. He said that he sat there for 3.5 excruciating minutes as the video was the worst thing that he'd ever seen. Seemed like hours as he was watching this. He was embarrassed by the cheesiness. It was just really painful. He was expecting the worst, thinking that he'd get booed out of the room. So finally the video ended and the lights came up, and all of a sudden, huge standing ovation by everybody there. He thought it was the worst thing he'd ever seen. They thought it was the greatest thing they'd ever seen, or at least really great. It was then that he realized, you know what, I think I can do this. The video, of course, hit at the perfect time with MTV on the horizon. It was pretty funny. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure to leave us a comment about Huey Lewis and this 80s classic, Do You Believe in Love? What are your memories of this song and in 1982 in general? If you like our content, we do invite you to subscribe below to be a permanent part of our community. We got new content every day. Make sure to look us up on Patreon and check us out. Our merch, get a Professor of Rock shirt. Help us keep the music alive. That's the idea. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.